Tick, tick, tick. That sound was my only proof I was still alive, the only thing tethering me to this world when everything else had faded. The clock above my hospital bed pulsed like a heartbeat, indifferent and steady, marking time I could not feel or understand. The air smelled of disinfectant and cedar, faint but familiar, like a memory I could not quite place in my confused mind. I tried to move, but my body refused every command I gave it. My eyelids were anchored shut, heavy as stone slabs. My fingers would not respond no matter how hard I tried. Somewhere beyond the beeping machines that measured my existence, I heard voices, low and official, signing papers with the scratch of pens on official forms. Death certificate, someone said clearly, the words cutting through the fog. That was the day I died, at least on paper, at least in their eyes and in the world's records. But it was not the day I was gone, not the day my consciousness left this world. My mind was awake, trapped inside a body the world had already written off, already mourned, already forgotten and moved past. The clock kept ticking its eternal rhythm. And I kept listening, held in that strange space between life and death, between existence and erasure, waiting for something I did not yet understand but knew was coming. My name is Chris Karter, and that name once meant something in the world of business and philanthropy. I am an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, a man who believed success could silence envy and win genuine love from those around me. I was wrong about so many things, blind to truths that should have been obvious. My family called me the golden son, the one who made it, the one who brought honor to our family name and fortune. I thought they loved me for who I was, thought the pride in their eyes when they looked at me was real and unconditional. But when I collapsed during a keynote speech in Geneva, my body giving out in front of hundreds of witnesses, they did not rush to my aid or my hospital bedside. They rushed to my bank accounts instead, moving quickly while I could not stop them. I was worth more dead than alive, more valuable as a memory than as a living, breathing man with rights and opinions. The realization came slowly, like poison spreading through veins, making everything clear in the worst possible way. They had been waiting for this moment, planning for it perhaps, and when it finally came, they moved with the efficiency of people who had rehearsed their roles perfectly. I had built an empire thinking it would protect me from the world. Instead, it became the very reason they wanted me gone forever. They held a funeral without my body, a grand spectacle for the cameras and the press who loved a tragic story. The newspapers wrote glowing obituaries that painted me as a saint. Visionary lost too soon, one headline read, next to a photo of me smiling at some charity gala from years before. My wife, Alora, wept before cameras with perfect timing, draped in black silk that shimmered under the lights, her performance absolutely flawless. My brother, Cedric, delivered a eulogy that sounded rehearsed because it absolutely was, practiced until every word landed perfectly. Every word, every pause, every catch in his voice had been practiced in front of mirrors. He spoke of my generosity, my vision, my legacy that would live on through their efforts. He thanked the mourners, the investors, and the employees who had gathered to pay respects. He did not mention that he had already planned the transfer of my assets, and already signed the papers that would make him CEO of everything I built. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, I lay in a coma in a Swiss clinic, breathing through machines, monitored by strangers who knew nothing of who I was. The world moved on without me, writing my story's ending. But I was not gone, not truly. I was simply forgotten, erased from a story that was still being written in ways they could not imagine. When I finally woke from the darkness, the world was completely different from the one I remembered. A man sat reading by the window, backlit by afternoon sun that streamed through white curtains. He was calm, deliberate, wearing a simple nurse's uniform that seemed out of place somehow. "You're safe, Mr. Carter," he said quietly, not looking up from his book immediately. "You've been under for 6 months. 6 months." The words did not make sense at first, bouncing around my confused brain. 6 months of my life gone like smoke. His name was Alaric June, he told me. I did not recognize him at first, my memory foggy and uncertain, full of holes. My mind struggled desperately to place his face among the thousands I had known. Then he smiled, a gentle, knowing smile, and something clicked deep in my memory. Years ago, I had funded a scholarship for a homeless boy who once guarded my car in the rain, refusing payment but accepting help when it was offered with respect. That boy had become the man now saving my life, the man who had tracked me down when everyone else had given up completely. He had paid for my care out of his own pocket, kept me hidden from those who wanted me gone, kept me breathing when it would have been easier to let me slip away. Why? I whispered, my voice hoarse from disuse and tubes. He closed his book carefully. "Because you saw me when no one else did. Because you treated me like a human being worth saving." Alaric showed me the world I had left behind, the world that thought I was dead and buried. He brought a tablet to my bedside and scrolled through news feeds with patient, careful hands. My company's rebirth was everywhere, plastered across every business publication. My wife had remarried already, this time to my CFO, a man named Marcus whom I had trusted implicitly with financial decisions. Cedric was now acting CEO, his face plastered across business magazines with headlines about new vision and fresh leadership. his quotes about innovation and legacy filling articles in major publications. They had renamed my corporate foundation the Karter Renaissance, as if my death had been a necessary sacrifice for their glorious new beginning. The irony was almost poetic, almost funny if it were not so cruel and calculated. I watched video after video, my chest tight with something I could not name or fully understand. It was not anger yet, not the hot burning rage I expected. It was clear, cold, and sharp. I asked Alaric one question, the only one that mattered in that moment of understanding. How much did they sell me for? He looked at me with sad, steady eyes that held years of wisdom and said simply, with devastating honesty, everything. Everything I had built from nothing, everything I had given them freely, everything I had believed was mine by right of creation, gone in 6 months. In the mirror beside my bed, I saw a man who no longer existed in the world's eyes or in official records. My hair had grayed significantly at the temples, silver threads where there had been none before the collapse. My face was thinner, older, marked by months of stillness and loss and machines. My eyes looked different too, harder somehow, like something inside had crystallized into diamond. The world thought I was gone, buried and mourned and forgotten. Perhaps it was time to let Chris Karter die completely, to let that version of myself stay buried in their memories. Perhaps it was time for someone wiser, someone more careful and strategic to take his place in the world. I stared at my reflection for a long time, tracing the changes with my eyes, noting the ways my face had become a stranger's face. I looked like a ghost already, pale and thin and otherworldly. And maybe that was exactly what I needed to be for now, for this next phase. A ghost with a clear purpose. A ghost with a carefully constructed plan. A ghost who remembered everything they had done and forgave nothing yet, maybe never. The man in the mirror was not Chris Karter anymore. He was something new, something harder, something they would not recognize until it was far too late to stop. Alaric contacted a lawyer I once trusted deeply, a woman named Miriam Vale who had handled my most sensitive business. She was known throughout legal circles for her quiet precision, her ability to dismantle empires without raising her voice or making dramatic threats. She arrived at the clinic one evening, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a calm expression that revealed absolutely nothing. She sat beside my bed and laid out the truth in careful stacks of documents and bank statements. Forged signatures on dozens of documents, offshore accounts in multiple countries, falsified wills that rewrote my intentions, everything legal on the surface, everything cruel and calculated beneath the paperwork. They had stolen not just my money but my identity, my voice, my very existence in the world's systems. "I can bring you back," she whispered, leaning forward, her eyes sharp and focused like a blade. "But not as Chris Karter, not in the way you were before. You must come back as proof, as living evidence of what they did." I understood immediately what she meant. This was not about revenge in any traditional sense. This was about truth, about showing the world what they had done in the darkness, about restoring order through exposure rather than violence. "Then let's begin," I said, my voice stronger now, more certain than it had been since I woke. That night, alone in my room with only the ticking clock for company, I wrote a letter to Elora. The words came easily, flowing from some deep place I had kept locked for years. "Did you ever love me or only what I gave?" I asked on the paper. "Did you mourn the man or the money he left behind? Did you weep for me or for the empire you could claim as your own?" I wrote until my hand ached terribly, until the paper was filled with questions I knew she would never answer honestly. But when I finished, I stared at the letter for a long time, reading it again and again in the dim light. Then I folded it carefully with deliberate creases and slid it behind my pocket watch, the silver one my father had given me on his deathbed. I let time hold the secret between its mechanical gears. Some truths are not worth delivering because they change absolutely nothing about what happened. Some truths are meant to stay with you forever, reminders of what you survived and what you learned about human nature. The letter would stay there, unread by her eyes, a ghost of words for a ghost of a man. I placed the watch on my nightstand and listened to it tick, each second a small victory of survival. We built it quietly, piece by careful piece, over weeks and months. A new corporation registered under the name CK Industries, anonymous enough to avoid immediate attention from anyone watching. We bought small stakes in companies, investments so small they were basically untraceable by normal methods, in every business Cedric now controlled with my stolen authority. Every purchase was strategic, chosen for maximum future impact. Every move was calculated 3 steps ahead. Each night the clock ticked beside me in my small room, steady and patient as always. Each morning, another thread of my stolen empire returned home silently, pulled gently back into my hands. Alaric handled the logistics with the precision of someone who understood complex systems intuitively. Miriam handled the legalities with the skill of someone who knew every loophole in international law. And I watched, silent and invisible to the world, as the pieces fell into place exactly as planned. It was not fast or dramatic, it was not the revenge of movies, but it was effective, relentlessly so. And effectiveness, I had learned through bitter experience, was worth more than spectacle or immediate satisfaction. The empire they had stolen was slowly, quietly, inevitably becoming mine again, piece by invisible piece. The scent followed me wherever I went, persistent and haunting in the best way. Cedar, the polish from my father's study, the room where he had taught me everything about business and life and honor. The room where he had said, his hand on my shoulder, "Trust is a currency stronger than gold, but spend it wisely, son." Now that scent reminded me why I could not destroy them with anger or violence or dramatic confrontation. I needed precision instead, not revenge in any traditional sense. Restoration of what was rightfully mine. I burned cedar incense in my small apartment, letting the scent fill every corner of the air as I worked late into the night, planning each step with obsessive care. It grounded me when rage threatened to cloud my judgment and make me stupid. It reminded me of who I was before the collapse, before the betrayal, before the death that was not death. And it reminded me constantly that the best way to win was not to fight openly in public view, but to rebuild carefully in the shadows, to restore what was mine through patience and strategy, rather than through force and fury that would only make me look like the villain. I appeared at corporate galas quietly and invisibly under a carefully constructed new identity. Christo Vale, investor and consultant, a name that meant nothing to anyone in the business world. I had changed enough physically that no one recognized me when I walked past. My face was thinner from the months in bed. My hair was different, styled in a new way. My voice was quieter, more measured, stripped of its old confidence. Cedric toasted his visionary comeback at a gala in Paris, his glass raised high, his smile wide and confident and false. Elora stood beside him, glowing in silver, her dress catching the light like water or mercury. She clinked her glass against his and said loudly for everyone to hear, "To rebirth and new beginnings." The room erupted in applause and cheers. They celebrated their success, their new beginning, their triumph over the tragedy they had manufactured. They did not notice the man watching them from the corner, the man in the simple black suit, the ghost they had buried with tears and speeches. I sipped my drink slowly and observed everything with careful eyes, their confidence, their arrogance, their certainty that they had won completely. I smiled, not with bitterness, but with the patience of someone who knows the truth. Let them celebrate now. Their time was ending soon. An anonymous audit arrived at the Karter Holdings Board's doorstep one Tuesday morning, a thick envelope filled with evidence, carefully documented and meticulously cross-referenced. Evidence of embezzlement, carefully hidden for years in complex transactions. Misused charity funds, donations that went to private accounts instead of helping anyone. Offshore accounts in Elora's name, filled with money that should have gone to real causes and real people. Cedric dismissed it publicly as corporate sabotage, an attack from jealous competitors who envied their success. He called a press conference and spoke confidently about weathering storms and staying focused on the mission ahead. But behind closed doors, according to our sources, he was panicking badly. He did not know where the audit came from or who had that level of access. He did not know who had such detailed information about their private dealings. He did not know it came from his own brother's careful documentation, from records I had kept for years just in case. The first crack had appeared in his perfect facade, small but visible to those watching. And cracks always spread if you know exactly where to apply pressure, I had learned. During a board vote weeks later, I placed a familiar silver watch on the mahogany table in front of me. It was casual, almost accidental, as if I had simply set it down while reaching for papers with my other hand. Cedric froze mid-sentence, his words dying in his throat. His eyes locked onto the watch, and all color drained from his face instantly. He knew that watch intimately. It had belonged to our father, passed down to me on his deathbed with specific instructions and blessings. "It's a family heirloom," I said evenly, my voice betraying nothing of the satisfaction I felt. "Picked it up at an auction last month in Geneva. Beautiful piece, isn't it? The craftsmanship is remarkable." Cedric smiled stiffly, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth, but sweat collected visibly behind his collar. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass with unsteady fingers. The past was beginning to whisper in his ear. And he was beginning to hear it clearly, beginning to wonder if ghosts could return from grave. The watch sat there throughout the entire meeting, ticking softly but audibly, a reminder of everything he had taken and everything he had lost, everything he thought was safely buried. Miriam brought in Adele Quinn, my former secretary, a woman of absolute loyalty and sharp precision. She had been fired unjustly after my death, dismissed without cause or severance, discarded like she meant nothing to anyone. She was loyal, incredibly sharp, and devastated by my supposed death in Geneva. When she saw me in Miriam's office that afternoon, she froze completely. Her eyes filled with tears instantly, spilling over. "Sir," she whispered, her voice breaking, her hand covering her mouth in shock. "You came back, I knew it, I knew something was wrong." I reached out and squeezed her hand gently, feeling the tremor in her fingers. "Not yet," I said softly but firmly. "First, we let them hang themselves with their own rope, their own lies." She nodded immediately, understanding the strategy, wiping her eyes with determination. She was ready to help, ready to fight, ready to see justice done properly. We spent hours going through records, through documents she had kept against company policy, through emails she had saved because something told her they would matter someday. She had been so careful over the years. She had been so smart. And now her careful documentation would become the evidence that destroyed them completely. Cedric invited Cristo Vale to a private dinner in Madrid, wanting to discuss a potential partnership and investment. The restaurant was expensive, exclusive, the kind of place where deals worth millions happened over wine and perfectly cooked steaks. He bragged extensively about Karter Holdings' upcoming merger with a major tech firm, about his vision for the future, about the legacy he was building on my grave. Between sips of wine, he leaned back in his chair comfortably and said thoughtfully, "You know, you remind me of my late brother. Too trusting, too willing to see the good in people who don't deserve it." I smiled carefully, setting down my glass with deliberate slowness. "And you remind me of a man who thinks trust is weakness instead of strength, who mistakes kindness for stupidity." He laughed, loud and genuine, thinking it was a compliment to his business acumen. He had absolutely no idea the servers were recording every word for my legal team, no idea that every boast was another piece of evidence. He talked for hours, drinking too much, revealing more than he realized, his arrogance making him careless in ways I had predicted. And I listened, patient as stone, knowing every word would matter very soon in courtrooms. Lawsuits began arriving in waves after that, like a storm building unstoppable momentum. Stockholders demanded full audits, wanting to know where their investments had gone exactly. Charities questioned missing funds loudly, asking about donations that never reached their intended recipients. Employees came forward with complaints about unpaid wages and broken promises that had destroyed their lives. Public opinion shifted dramatically and quickly. The empire they had stolen was collapsing under the weight of its own greed, and I had not raised my voice even once. I had not made a single public accusation against anyone. Miriam coordinated everything from her office, calm and methodical, each lawsuit carefully timed for maximum impact. Alaric kept me updated constantly, his voice steady over the phone, reporting each new development as it happened. And I sat in my small apartment, watching the news coverage spread, the cedar incense burning low. The clock ticked beside me constantly, and the world began to turn in my direction, slowly but inevitably, like planets following their ordained orbits. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. Elora called me one evening unexpectedly. She did not know who I was yet, did not recognize Cristo Val as her supposedly dead husband. Her voice trembled with genuine fear and confusion. "They're saying Cedric forged documents," she said desperately. "They're saying there was systematic fraud. It can't be true. Please tell me it's not true." I paused deliberately, letting the silence stretch between us uncomfortably. "People often become what they most accuse others of," I said gently, my voice kind but firm. "It's one of life's strange ironies." She hung up without another word, the line going dead. 2 hours later, according to Miriam's careful monitoring, she tried to liquidate assets desperately, moving money into what she thought was a safe account in the Cayman Islands. But it was an account already traced by my lawyers, already flagged by international authorities, already part of the massive evidence building against them. Every move they made tightened the noose around their necks. Every desperate action became another piece of proof. They were panicking now, making stupid mistakes, and mistakes were exactly what I had been waiting for patiently all along. Anonymous leaks hit major outlets within days, carefully coordinated releases of damaging information. Articles titled "The Karter Scandal, What Did They Hide?" flooded the media landscape everywhere. Major newspapers ran front-page stories with shocking details. Business networks devoted entire segments to the unfolding drama. Cedric's board turned against him publicly, distancing themselves in official statements. His investors vanished overnight, pulling funding and issuing statements of serious concern. He shouted to the cameras during an impromptu press conference, his face red with fury and desperation. "My brother's legacy was mine to protect," he yelled at reporters. "I did everything for him, everything." That quote became the headline everywhere immediately. And it became the evidence of theft, the inadvertent admission that he had taken what was not his to take. Social media exploded with commentary and condemnation. People who had admired him now questioned everything about his character. The fall was spectacular and public, exactly as it needed to be. The truth was spreading like wildfire, and there was absolutely no way to contain it now. The day of reckoning came on a cold morning in London. Karter Holdings called an emergency shareholders meeting at their headquarters building. Reporters filled the hall, cameras everywhere, the air electric with anticipation. At the back of the room, I entered slowly and deliberately. I wore black, simple but elegant and expensive. The silver watch ticked on my wrist, visible to anyone who looked closely enough. Cedric saw me first from the stage where he stood, his lips parted in shock. His face went completely white. He gripped the podium for support, knuckles white. "Elora," he whispered urgently, turning to her beside him. I walked forward through the crowd, which parted instinctively like water. Yes, I said calmly, my voice carrying through the silent room perfectly. Alive, the single word hung in the air like a bomb. Cameras flashed frantically. Reporters surged forward desperately. Questions erupted from every direction, overlapping. But I kept walking, steady and calm, until I stood directly before them both, the brother and wife who had buried me. For 10 full seconds, no one breathed in that massive room. The room was frozen, suspended in complete disbelief. Then flashes exploded like lightning, blinding and constant. Questions flew from every direction, overlapping desperately. Is this a hoax? Mr. Carter, where have you been? What happened in Geneva? Why did you disappear? Are you really alive? Cedric stammered something incoherent about medical errors, about miscommunication, about terrible misunderstandings that could be explained. But the truth was already sealed, already documented in the folders Miriam distributed efficiently to every major outlet. Every fraudulent document bore his signature clearly. Every lie had been recorded and independently verified. Every theft had been traced and proven beyond doubt. I did not need to speak dramatically. I did not need to accuse anyone publicly. The evidence spoke for itself, clear and absolutely undeniable. I simply stood there, calm and present, the living proof that they had declared dead. The ghost made flesh finally. The man they tried to erase, standing in the light again. Cedric resigned within hours, forced out by a unanimous board vote. Alora fled the country that same night but was soon summoned back by court order. Their properties, my properties, everything they had claimed as theirs, reverted to the trust I had built quietly through Miriam. I did not celebrate publicly. I did not throw parties or give triumphant speeches. I simply sat in my father's old cedar study, the one I had reclaimed, watching sunlight dance on the clock face. Tick, tick, tick. The sound was peaceful now, no longer a reminder of death but of patience rewarded. Time never seeks revenge actively. It simply reveals what was always true beneath the lies. The lies could not last forever. The theft could not remain hidden indefinitely. And I had simply waited, patient as the clock, for truth to surface naturally. Justice did not require my anger or violence. It only required my patience and my careful documentation of every wrong they had committed against me. Miriam asked me the question I knew was coming eventually. Will you press criminal charges? She sat across from me, pen poised over legal papers, ready to proceed however I directed. I thought of my brother's trembling hands at the meeting, his face pale with shame and fear. I thought of my wife's empty eyes when she finally saw me, recognized me, understood what she had done. No, I said quietly but firmly. Their punishment is living without trust from anyone. Miriam raised an eyebrow questioningly. Explain your reasoning. I leaned back in my chair. They will spend the rest of their lives knowing everyone knows what they did. They will never be trusted again by anyone. That is a life sentence more effective than any prison could ever be. She nodded slowly, understanding dawning. Forgiveness is not weakness in any sense. It is the final luxury of those who have won completely. I did not need them behind bars. I needed them to live with the weight of their choices every single day. With Alaric and Adele, I founded the Carter Foundation for Second Chances. We supported those who had been written off, forgotten, or betrayed by the systems meant to protect them. People who had lost everything and been told they were worth nothing. People like Alaric once was on the streets. People like I had become in that hospital bed. Every wall in the Foundation's building smelled faintly of cedarwood, a deliberate choice I insisted on. Every office had a clock, ticking softly in the background. Reminders of patience and rebirth for everyone who worked there. We hired people others would not hire. We funded projects others called too risky. We believed in second chances because we knew personally how valuable they could be. The foundation grew quickly, supported by people who understood its mission deeply. And every day, I walked those halls knowing that something genuinely good had come from something terrible, that my death had somehow led to a better life for many. Months later, I visited Cedric in a small seaside clinic where he was recovering from a complete breakdown. The place was quiet, peaceful, far from the city and the scandal that had consumed him. He was thinner now, quieter, the arrogance completely gone from his demeanor. When he saw me walk into his room, he whispered hoarsely, "Why didn't you destroy me completely?" I sat down across from him, taking my time to answer. "Because you already did that yourself," I said simply. "Destroyed yourself with your choices and your greed, and I refused to follow you into that darkness." He nodded once, tears in his eyes finally, and for the first time in our lives we sat in silence. That was not competition or resentment. It was not forgiveness exactly, but it was not war anymore either. It was simply two brothers, sitting together, understanding finally what had been lost and what could never be recovered. The silence held more truth than any words could ever express. Now I rise before dawn and walk the Foundation gardens, dew shining on roses like tiny clocks of light. The world believes I came back from the dead, that I performed some miracle of survival. But the truth is simpler and more profound than that. I returned to life consciously. I chose to live rather than to die, to build rather than to destroy, to create rather than to take revenge. Because wealth fades inevitably. Power fades with time. Empires crumble eventually. But integrity, that is truly immortal. The watch ticks beside me always, steady and calm, a reminder of my father and his wisdom about trust. And as I look into the sunrise each morning, painting the sky in gold and pink, I whisper the final truth I have learned through suffering. They buried me in greed in their hunger for what I had built, but I rose in grace in the quiet dignity of truth restored. The clock ticks eternally, time moves forward relentlessly, and I am finally, truly alive. Have you ever been betrayed by those you trusted most? Tell me in the comments. You are not alone. And if this story moved you, subscribe for more stories of survival, patience, and the quiet power of truth.